as we say in our religious language, peace to you, assalamu alaikum. With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, we witness openly that none deserves human worship except God alone. And we witness openly that Muhammad, to whom the Quran revealed, is God's servant and his messenger. Let me first say, I want to thank Professor Lowe and DISC and all those responsible for organizing this program. I think it's very, very important effort, and I'm hopeful that what I share with you today can also add to what we've already heard. I thank my friend. I haven't seen him in a long time. I remember him, and he remembered me, but I couldn't really identify until he put that man. He unmasked, and I was able to identify who he is. And also my sister, who I just met last evening, Dr. Camila, who is from Brooklyn, and I'm from the richer part of New York, Harlem. Rich in culture. But I'm honored to be here. And Dr. Camila's presentation on black psychology, black Muslim psychology, pardon me, is where I'm going to begin. So I mentioned to her last night that it's her presentation. My presentation will be a continuity, a continuation of where she left off at. The Nation of Islam was simply a strategy. And many writers, scholars, and I'm not one of those, about Islam missed that very important idea, that it was simply a strategy. An idea to bring African Americans to a place to meet their full humanity in the United States of America. The environment of America during the time of the founder's presence, Mr. Farad Muhammad, when he came to the United States, he came with an idea that was not Islamic. Many it was called Islam, but it was not Islamic. And he made it very clear that he was not asking Elijah Muhammad to teach religion. Elijah Muhammad's assignment was to teach a wake-up message, a message that would clean up the African Americans, or blacks, or coloreds at that time. The philosophy was do for self. Main philosophy, the idea that drove the movement was to do for self. And the part of the psychology that Mr. Farad used was, as ex-slaves at the time, ex-slaves, people who were still in the ashes of slavery and in the flames of Jim Crow, Mr. Farad used a strategy, a psychology, because what was affecting the psychic, the spirit, the social life of African Americans or blacks at the time was white supremacy, racism. And this is no criticism of Christianity at all. It's not intended to be that at all. But the idea of a Caucasian man on the cross as God has a deep, deep, deep psychological impact on everyone who looks at that who's not Caucasian. I remember our leader, Imam W. Muhammad, he put an article in our Muslim journal At the time, I think it was called Balalian News. He said, what would happen to the minds of Caucasians if they sat in churches for 400 years looking at the image of a black person as God? And he left it as a question. And from that statement, our community developed an organization called CRAID. And CRAID, with the acronym was C-R-A-I-D. And it stood for Committee to Remove All Images that Attempt to Portray Divine. Now, I bring that up early on because the Nation of Islam was, I mentioned, a reverse psychology. So that idea of a white image being God and having such an impact on the psychic and the spirit and the mobility, the mental mobility of a people. When he used that, when that was used, Mr. Farad came with a strategy, he reversed it. The Nation of Islam said, the black man is God and the white man is the devil. Powerful psychology to resurrect the mind and the spirit of a people who have been subjugated, who have been deprived of their presence in the human world, like everybody else. So he comes with this idea, the black man is God and white man is the devil. And to do for yourself. To do for yourself is natural. As human beings, it's natural. Babies, I watch babies. I study babies. Babies, when they get to a certain point, and you mothers know better than us fathers, they want to do for themselves, just naturally. If you're feeding them, at a certain point, they want to reach for the spoon, and they want to feed themselves. Nothing gets on the bed. Everything gets on the wall or wherever else in their effort to feed themselves. The same with walking. When they first begin to try to walk, you might say, what does this have to do with the Nation of Islam? The Nation of Islam is a symbol of what happens to individuals. When a baby begins to try to walk, they take a step and they fall. And Mom, Camila, reach for them. Or Dad, Waheed, reach for them. And they have this look on their face, like, leave me. I am determined to do this. And even when they're standing, they shiver. They shiver because they're determined to get the next step in on their own. Well, that was the whole psychology of the Nation of Islam. For us to sever the tie with the Caucasian world, lose our independence, separate from them, even to the point where the Imam Muhammad, he asked the United States for a separate state so that we could separate. But that was only, again, a strategy. That was to help us lose the grip that we had so tightly upon the Caucasian world for the survival of our lives. So it's clear, I want you to be clear that the Nation of Islam was not seen as religion. It was a wake-up message. And Mr. Farad told the Honorable Muhammad, he said that don't you worry about teaching religion. One of your sons will teach religion. He told him, don't you worry about teaching religion. Teach the message that will free your people. Mr. Farad used language like he has 17 million keys. he was only saying for 17 million African Americans or blacks at the time, I got the key to unlock them to freedom. And one of the ideas in the Nation of Islam was freedom, justice, and equality. In fact, that was said, that's what Islam was. Islam meant freedom, justice, and equality. And what was that designed to do? To say to us, that's what was missing in our life. Freedom, justice, and equality. So here's this message of do for yourself. Don't depend upon the rest of the world. Build your own life. The whole idea was we building a nation. And men and women who got attracted to that message, they worked diligently. I remember growing up in Harlem. I was playing basketball. And kudos to Duke and Carolina. Kudos. And we may very well meet. Now, this is me. I love basketball, so just put me on pause for a minute. We may meet in the Final Four. It's a possibility. And our fantastic freshman said he wanted to meet Carolina in the ACC. He might get a chance to meet in this Final Four. I hope they do. I hope we do get a chance to meet you. Okay, I'll be back on track. But the idea of the Nation of Islam and how it attracted so many people. And again, when I was coming up in Harlem, and I was playing basketball, and we used to play at a church called Church of the Masters, which was right down on, any of you familiar with Manhattan, Harlem, you know where Morningside Drive is, and Morningside Park. And right above Morningside Park is Columbia University, and we used to play basketball at Columbia University. Well, I lived in the St. Nicholas Project, which was like 4 blocks from the famous Apollo Theater. And Nation of Islam at that time, they had a steak and take restaurant on 125th Street on the downtown side of the street. And the men would be out there, bald head, bow ties, with the bean pies, with the Muhammad Speaks. And they were so attractive to me as a young man, 11, 12 years old, because they represented something that was like a need in the soul of African Americans to have a sense of dignity and respect. I remember we would see the sisters with their white uniforms on, the MGT, Muslim Girl Training, and we would see them in their white, and you wouldn't even think about whistling or anything. I mean, that thought wouldn't even come to the drunkest man's mind if he saw them. He wouldn't do it because of the respect that it garnered, or they garnered, because of their presence in our community. In 1958 is when Durham got introduced to the Nation of Islam. A gentleman by the name of Kenneth Muhammad, who was at the time Kenneth Murray, Minister Kenneth, was from Baltimore. And we have a gentleman here with us today who is doing some research on one of the wonderful human beings that was in the Nation of Islam, Brother Osher Salaam. He too was from Baltimore, but Kenneth Muhammad was from Baltimore. And there was a minister in Baltimore by the name of Isaiah. And Isaiah had some roots in North Carolina. And as many of you may know, that the Nation of Islam was always about expanding, about growing, trying to reach African American people. So they always sought opportunities to go to different areas in what they called fishing. Fishing. Some of you may have heard that line. They were fishing. And you know, when you fish, you have to put something on the hook if you're going to catch somebody. And it's called bait. And a part of the bait of the Nation of Islam was to have serious business development. So when Minister Kenneth Muhammad came to this area, he left his family back in Baltimore. He came to this area to establish Islam. And he began to work in Durham area. And as you know, Durham at that time has always been a very conscious area, very conscious area. And he began to work, and they would begin to build temples in the Black Wall Street area of Durham. Kenneth Muhammad was very, very articulate man, very nice human being. I got to meet him, got to know him very well. Very articulate man, human being. He was an artist, he was a musician, he was a constructor, he was a builder. So he knew how to build community. And he related very well with all the leaders in the city of Durham. So in 1959, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad made Umrah to Mecca. And the teaching of the Nation of Islam was, Mr. Farad said, that in Mecca, the streets were paved with gold, and they were mansions. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad comes to Umrah looking for that picture. When he gets to Mecca, he see rocks, he see dirt roads, and just imagine, your teacher, the person you looked up to, you saw as God in the person, gives you this picture of a place. And when you get to that place, the picture he gave you is nothing like this place. Elijah Muhammad came back and told the community, we can't look to them for nothing. We got to do this for ourselves. That's when the business interests began to develop. He began to emphasize business. In Durham, the impact of the Nation of Islam in business was tremendous. One brother told me, I wasn't here, one brother told me that he ran the fish market here in Durham. And he said they used to get as much as 50,000 pounds of fish a month and move it. They had fish forces. Men would go in the neighborhoods with the white and G fish. My sister know about that fish, and I'm sure you all do too. So the white and G go in the neighborhoods, and all this began to attract people because again, here you see men with suits on and bow ties selling fish. The brother also told me that they would clean fish, and they would be cleaning the fish. Now, you go to a fish market, you don't expect to see nobody there with no red vest on and a white shirt and black pants and a bow tie. But that's how they were in the fish market. And again, all this is attracting people, African Americans, to the community. Then they began to set up, they had food trucks that would go around servicing the universities. They had takeout restaurants in different places. They had grown so large that they had to move from where they originally was on a place called Page Auditorium. They had to move from there. And that's when they bought the property up on Chapel Hill Street where Al-Razak is presently today. That place used to be a nightclub. In the West End, where Al-Razak is right now, was one of the most terrible places in Durham. The impact of the Nation of Islam at that time cleaned that area up so that the city recognized them for beautifying that area. Then they opened up the Salaam Cultural Center. That's where Brother Yusef Salim comes in at. He was a musician. And so many people got their start there at the Salaam Cultural Center. And one person is a good friend of my wife, Nina Freelon. She got her start right there with Yusef Salim. Yusef Salim also used to take young men out in the community and teach them how to keep a community clean, and they would clean up in the neighborhood. Another brother told me that the community used to go to areas where elder people were in the neighborhood, and they would actually weatherize their houses. This is the serious impact that the Nation of Islam had on the city of Durham at that time. Fast forward, in 1974, Imam W. Muhammad was excommunicated out of the community, and his father brought him back on several occasions because he was seen as the one that was going to bring the community into its religious development and awareness. And from a very early age, as early as 12 years old, he told us that on one occasion his parents went out on a Wednesday evening. That's when they would hold court for anyone who violated any of the policies, any of the rules in the nation. And they went out and left him in the house by himself. And he said that the house began to talk. He said he got a little nervous. The house began to talk. And he said he made supplication, dua. And at the time, the Nation of Islam, you know, that was the practice. What they said was prayer was dua. What was Ramadan was every Christmas they would fast. Hajj was going to Chicago every year. That was the Hajj, okay? So Imam Muhammad is making dua, 12 years old. And he said, "Oh Allah, if I am not seeing you right, please help me to see you right." Now from his inception, from his beginning, Mr. Farad told Elijah Muhammad and Clara Muhammad to name him after me. And he is going to be a helper to us in this work. So he was always seen as this special child that was going to help to continue the work of the Nation of Islam. So he made that dua. And he began his path to come and embrace al-Islam. Much different from the ideology that the Nation of Islam had begun to teach. In 1974, his father was in the hospital very sick. And some ministers bought his father a tape of what he was teaching, or what Wallace was teaching at the time. His father said, "Son, let's listen to this tape." They listened to the tape, and all the national ministers were around on Elijah Muhammad's bedside. And when we put the tape on, Elijah Muhammad jumped up. He said, "My boy has got it. He can go anywhere and teach that gospel." Now, he wasn't teaching a black separatist. He was teaching the religion of al-Islam that was there, identified for all human beings. So in 1975, well, actually, right after that, he was put over the community, and it was still the Nation of Islam. He was put over the community. In January of 1975, he made a trip. He was going all around the country, letting people know, get ready for the change. And he came to New York. Again, I wasn't in the community. I came to the community in 1978. But as a student in the community, it's my obligation to know the history, because I'm from that womb. Just as my sister was giving her a history of her family, I should be able to get a history of my religious family in my community. So the Imam came to Malcolm Shabazz Mosque in Harlem, the mosque that he named after his friend, Malcolm X. He came and he said, "I am Chicago. So if you want to report me, I am Chicago." And he said, "And if Minister Farrakhan doesn't follow what needs to be followed, we'll sit him down, and if all of you want him to get back up, he won't get back up." February, about a month and a half later, we would have our annual Savior's Day, February 26th every year. And this is important because we strongly believe that God has been guiding this movement all the while. Even in our ignorance, in Islam, actions are based upon motives. The motives was pure. Elijah Muhammad's motives was pure. Elijah Muhammad was a man who was born in Deep Step, Georgia, about as big as this room. He witnessed coming home one day, somebody being hung. He saw how his people was being treated. So he had an urge that was pressing his soul to be able to do something for his people. So he was sincere. we believe that God's hand has been on this community all the while. And so every year we would have Savior's Day, February 26th. In 1975, Elijah Muhammad dies on February 25th, the day before. There were Muslims on their way to Chicago for Savior's Day that hadn't even become aware that Elijah Muhammad had died. And some of them, when they heard it, they said, oh, that's just the devil lying again. That's what they said. So when they get there, W.D. Muhammad then get raised up as the leader of the community. And from the very day, the first day, publicly, he began to make the changes to the community. Very beginning. He began to put Mr. Farad and his father in their right place. Yes. As simply social reformers. Then he began the work of transforming this community. And think of the transformation of a worm to a butterfly. That's how you should see this community. From a worm crawling to a butterfly. And what makes the worm the butterfly? It eats from the best. And that's what he began to do, to transform this community. He established immediately. Much of the Muslim world was criticizing him, saying he moved too slow. Many of the people inside the walls of the nation were saying he was moving too fast. So he had to move at the pace. But within a year, he established prayer. He established our first Ramadan in September of 1975. And my time is up, and so I can get more in the Q&A, I'm sure. But he established Ramadan September 1975. He passed away. Everything's a sign. God says everything in the heavens and the earth and in yourselves are instructive signs. Don't overlook them. There's a message in it for you. September 9th, 1975, September 7th, 1975 was the first day of Ramadan for the Islamic world. Imam W. Muhammad passes away. His last address was September 7th, 2008. He passed away September 9th, 2008. 33 years later, and you scholars in the room know that a full circle of Ramadan is 33 years. That sounds to me, job well done. Thanks.